Pope Francis points to heaven, what he's saying about Mother Angelica. The Supreme Court's unusual move, why it could be good news for the Little Sisters of the Poor. President Obama hosts dozens of world leaders, their focus, nuclear security. And remembering Mother Angelica's legacy, her role as a media pioneer. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Easter Wednesday, March 30th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. The Little Sisters of the Poor say they have good reason to be encouraged. This after the Supreme Court takes an unusual step in their case challenging the government's contraceptive mandate. Wyatt Goolsby reports from the High Court tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, both sides of this case will have to spell out to the Supreme Court how the HHS mandate could work with insurance plans without violating religious freedom. And while we are still nowhere close to a final Supreme Court decision, this request could imply which way the Supreme Court justices are leaning. It was just 1 week ago that supporters of the Little Sisters of the Poor rallied outside the Supreme Court. Faith-based groups argue the health care mandate violates their beliefs by making them complicit in providing birth control drugs.
The burden is the burden on our conscience of having to collaborate with something that we consider to be morally objectionable and evil.
Yesterday, the High Court took a step few were expecting. They called for both sides to present alternative ways to avoid forcing women religious to provide services that go against their faith. It's a move Jonathan Keim says doesn't happen very often.
It's very rare.
Keim is general counsel at the Judicial Crisis Network, a group that closely follows the Supreme Court. He says the justice's request for more information implies the government may have an uphill battle.
Frankly, the burden is on the government to show its side, from its perspective, what the alternatives would be, because this is the burden that the federal law puts on the federal government.
Supporters of the government mandate say the health care law does not force the Little Sisters to pay for services they disagree with. But that issue is under debate in smaller court cases across the country. That's why Keim says the outcome in this case will be critical.
There are very likely thousands of other religious ministries and organizations that would be subject to federal law apart from this case, and so they would be affected by whatever solution comes up. So the stakes couldn't be higher on this.
The justices say both sides have until April 20th to file a new round of legal briefs. A decision is not expected to be handed down until June, but even that is not set in stone. There's a possibility the court could choose to wait until a ninth Supreme Court justice is appointed before handing down a final decision. Brian?
Thank you. Wyatt Goolsby at the Supreme Court. President Obama's nominee to the Supreme Court returns to Capitol Hill today to meet with more senators. Merrick Garland needs Senate approval if he is to join the High Court. Republican leaders say they won't hold hearings for Garland. They believe the next president should pick the successor to the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Democrats say Garland deserves a vote.
I want someone who, after we have the hearings, the American people go, I'd like 9 of those.
Illinois Senator Mark Kirk is the only Republican to meet with Garland so far. Kirk and 2 other GOP senators recently broke party ranks, calling for a hearing and a vote on Garland. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pope Francis offers a special blessing for Mother Angelica following her death on Easter Sunday.
Papa Francisco, te queremos. Su bendición al alma de Mother Angelica.
She is in heaven, the Pope says, pointing upward after blessing an image of Mother brought to today's general audience by EWTN staffers from our Rome Bureau. Cardinal George Pell will celebrate a memorial mass Friday in Rome at the same time as Mother's Mass of Christian burial in Huntsville, Alabama. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump is drawing a lot of attention tonight for saying women who have had an abortion should be punished. MSNBC host Chris Matthews asked him about it.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion, yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
10 cents, 10 years,
I don't know. That I don't know.
That is not in line with what the pro-life movement teaches. March for Life President Jeanne Mancini will join us in a moment with reaction to that statement. The 3 remaining Republican presidential candidates no longer commit to supporting the party's eventual nominee. Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich had earlier agreed to back the party's pick. At a CNN town hall in Milwaukee Tuesday night, Trump says we'll see who it is. Cruz says, I'm not in the habit of supporting someone who attacks my wife and children. Kasich said, I will wait and see what happens. Well, the tables have turned. The FBI got no help from Apple trying to unlock a terror suspect's iPhone. Now Apple wants info from the feds and is not likely to get it. Apple wants to know how the FBI managed to unlock the iPhone of the San Bernardino terror suspect. The agency says it used a mysterious third party to break into that phone. The tech company fears the FBI exploited a security flaw, possibly putting customer information at risk. The feds showed no interest in helping Apple at this point. Dozens of world leaders converge on Washington for a summit on securing nuclear material. Chief White House correspondent Lauren Ashburn begins our team coverage tonight.
Ryan, more than 50 world leaders will convene in the city, summit the White House tomorrow and Friday. They include leaders from Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The primary goal is to find a way to prevent ISIS from obtaining nuclear material. This summit comes on the heels of what is believed to have been a nuclear missile test Tuesday by North Korea. And these meetings take on more of an added meaning, given the recent terrorist attacks in Belgium where ISIS suicide bombers killed 32 people and wounded more than 300. Previewing tomorrow's summit, the White House today applauded its past nuclear efforts, including the most recent treaty to keep Iran from creating a nuclear bomb.
The Russians have been able to effectively coordinate with the United States on our top nuclear priority, and we've been pleased that Iran has followed through on the steps that they committed to take.
But despite that success, Russia is a no-show at the summit.
Russia is isolated from the rest of the international community, that for whatever reason, they've chosen not to engage in this conversation.
In addition to discussing nuclear issues, President Obama is expected to meet separately with President Xi of China. They will discuss common objectives, including how to improve our global economy, reverse climate change, and enhance cybersecurity to protect U.S. interests. And the president will also convene a meeting with Japan's prime minister and South Korea's president to improve ties between those two nations. Jason Calvi is with us now, has reaction from former national security officials, many of whom are critical of the president's plans.
Yeah, Lauren, it's right here where those world leaders will be talking about chilling issues, like what if a terrorist gets nuclear material? Today I had the chance to talk to the former director of the CIA. Another intelligence insider says he's skeptical good will come from this Obama-led summit.
Former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers used to chair the House Intelligence Committee.
Why are you so skeptical?
I just don't think that we have the negotiation power today that we would need to bring these nuclear nations together, including China.
And Rogers says he's worried about Russia's nuclear plans.
They have suggested they want to back out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, which are those short-term nuclear weapons, and they're doing that to beat their chest. So when they decided not to come, I think that sent a pretty clear signal that we're in for some tough sledding.
Former National Security Agency and CIA Director Michael Hayden used to think the nuclear problem was history.
For about 10 years, I thought, wow, that was then. We don't have to worry about that now. But in the last couple of years, I have begun to come around to the great belief and fear that the nuclear question has not left center stage.
The former Air Force general who served both Democrat and Republican administrations says summits like this can help.
The great fear that the more of this stuff that is out there, and there is more out there, that increases the odds that some state either uses it or loses it, each of which would be very, very bad. So I applaud what's going on here, and to the degree we can get international cooperation in trying to cap this problem, the better, the more safe we'll be.
And it's not just the terrorists that are on the minds of these world leaders. The Deputy Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says North Korea is getting closer to being able to put a nuclear weapon on a missile targeting the United States. He says as they get closer, the United States has no choice but to act. Reporting here in Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Jason. And President Obama comments about Pope Francis during today's Easter prayer breakfast at the White House.
I was struck last week by the image of Pope Francis washing the feet of refugees. Different faiths, different countries. And what a powerful reminder of our obligations.
Obama says the prayer breakfast takes on new meaning following recent terror attacks in Belgium and Pakistan. He says terrorists want to weaken our faith and cause division among religions. He adds, if Easter means anything, it's that you don't have to be afraid. Critics say Obama's policies erode religious freedom, the institution of marriage, and the sanctity of life. Hundreds of Muslim protesters end their demonstrations in Pakistan today. The government threatened to use force to disperse them. The protesters demanded enforcement of Sharia or Islamic law and called for the death of a Christian woman jailed for blasphemy. Father Bernardo Cervellera, editor-in-chief of Asia News, joining us now from Rome. Father, what are Christians facing in a very hostile environment in Pakistan right now?
The situation of Christians is full of uncertainties because they can be accused of blasphemy by anybody and they can be condemned to death penalty very easily, very easily, like Asia Bibi, the one we are trying to get free. And they can go to mass and perhaps there is a suicide bomb blowing when they are entering the church. And also like last time in which people, they were walking in the park and there was a suicide attack. So practically Christians are very uncertain of their future, of their life, and with them, I would say, all the people in Pakistan, because this situation affects not only Christians but also Muslims, Shia people, Sikh and Hindu and so on.
Do you expect the Pakistani government to act in any substantial way to protect Christians and other minorities?
But Justice and Peace and many bishops in Pakistan, they've asked the government to pass from the theory, from words to acts, because the government is always promising to do whatever it can to stop terrorism. But the point is that they don't have only to use military strength, but they have to change the culture of the people, the culture of the schools. There are texts in which Muslims are pushed to kill Christians. There is a way of life in which minorities are marginated, they are put aside. So it seems that the government needs something more than that only the military strength.
The editor of Asia News, Father Bernardo Cervellera, joining us from Rome tonight. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Coming up, March for Life, Mother Angelica as a force behind the pro-life movement. And Pope-mobile auction, how another archdiocese benefits from the Pope's humble wheels.
I heard the other day we have too much population. You've already killed millions and millions and millions and millions of children. You got too much population, you're kidding yourself. Another 10 years would just be a lot of old people looking at each other.
EWTN's Foundress, the late Mother Angelica, reflecting on the tragedy of abortion in the way only mother can do it. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. A new label for a common abortion-inducing drug, RU-2486, could undo restrictions on medication abortions passed by several states. Ohio, North Dakota, and Texas prohibit off-label use of the drug Mifeprex, used in combination with another drug to abort a baby. The FDA now says Mifeprex is safe and effective for terminating a pregnancy in accordance with the new label. The label now states a smaller dose of the drug can be used up to 2 months of pregnancy. Utah is now the first state requiring doctors to give anesthesia to women having an abortion at 20 weeks of pregnancy or later. Anesthesia needs to go through the woman in order to reach the baby. The bill, signed by Republican Governor Gary Herbert this week, validates that a baby feels pain at that point. A spokesman says the governor is adamantly pro-life and believes in minimizing any pain that may be caused to an unborn child. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe vetoes a Republican-backed bill seeking to block state funding for Planned Parenthood. McAuliffe, a Democrat, had long promised to veto the legislation. He labels it part of a continuing effort led by extremists to limit abortion rights. He also vetoed a religious freedom bill protecting those who refuse to conduct non-traditional marriage ceremonies. And Congress issues a dozen new subpoenas to organizations that buy baby body parts. The Selective Investigative Panel on Infant Lives started investigating abortion businesses after the Center for Medical Progress released a series of undercover videos. So much to cover with Jeanne Mancini, president of March for Life. Donald Trump coming out with this statement that women who had abortions should be punished. What's the reaction to that?
Unbelievable. So out of touch with the pro-life movement, but out of touch with women. I mean, the last thing that a woman needs who's made that terrible, sad choice is punishment. She needs hope and healing. She needs mercy. And so we've been, putting out press releases and doing whatever we can to kind of roll this back. It's terrible.
What about this drug labeling change that the FDA approved?
RU 486, its chemical abortion was approved in 2000. Its approval was rushed, politicized, it was flawed, and it's dangerous for women. It's harder on women than surgical abortion, and essentially what the FDA did today was they made this easier for women to use and for longer periods of time. So they took away some of the medical oversight to this. So what they're really doing is putting ideology in the place of women's health.
In Virginia, the governor vetoes a bill that would have taken some money away from Planned Parenthood. Is this a trend we're seeing?
Well, one thing to point out here, of course, is that he was very much elected by Planned Parenthood. I mean, they put a lot into getting him elected, and let's hope it's not a trend. I'm happy to see lots of trends with governors putting into place blocks to Planned Parenthood and other abortion facilities receiving funding. I mean, let's let other, non-abortion facility health clinics do this good work.
And finally, Utah's new bill. Doesn't it recognize the humanity of the baby in the womb?
Sure, I love it. I mean, you can't say that this is a lifeless blob of tissue. The baby feels pain at 20 weeks, and that's what this bill is basically doing. It's saying, let's give the baby anesthesia before its demise, essentially.
So much going on this life front. EWTN's Foundress, Mother Angelica, spoke out clearly and often about life. Listen.
You say, well, why are you talking so much about life? Because I want other people to live. That's why. It's a teaching of the Lord that God alone gives life and God alone takes life.
That was a 1994 interview with Nellie Gray, the founder of the March for Life. So as president of March for Life, talk about Mother's impact on this movement.
Oh my gosh, I got to tell you, I love Mother Angelica so much. She's just such a pioneer. So her putting EWTN at the forefront of the March for Life, really, I mean, we work hand in glove with EWTN. It's just been an amazing gift. Probably 85% of people who watch the March for Life on TV watch it through EWTN, and we work so closely together in preparing it. So I'm so grateful to Mother for doing that, for making the March for Life really important, but also her catechism, her evangelizing, everything, it just had at the crux of it the church's teachings and the respect for the inherent dignity of the human person, even when it's tough to talk about. And it came out in everything she did, the way that she acted, the choices that she made with EWTN, but just in who she was as a person. So
and
I'm just
we
so
are
grateful.
her living legacy, which will go on. Jeanne, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the Bishop of Tulsa seeks more dignity for people who are nearing death. Bishop Edward Slattery explained his mission during a recent trip to Rome. He says Tulsa is raising money for a house to be called Porticelle, Latin for door to heaven. It will help people who need compassionate end-of-life care when dying at home is not an option.
Just because you're dying doesn't mean you don't have, there's no reason to hope. Just the opposite. Christ has changed the meaning of death to the entrance into life. Let God decide when you die. He knows when you should, and then he will take you to himself.
Tulsa's St. Joseph residence, which once helped those dying from AIDS, closed after medical advances curbed the AIDS epidemic. Up next, reflections on our foundress, how Mother Angelica pioneered cable television. And Vatican insider Joan Lewis describes Mother's impact beyond the United States.
Dio è più grande del nostro peccato.
The Holy Father during today's general audience urging everyone to say, God is greater than our sin. Thank you for joining us on this Easter Wednesday. I'm Brian Patrick. A Fiat Pope Francis used during his trip to New York City in September could bring a nice chunk of cash to the Archdiocese of New York. The car is being auctioned with proceeds going to Catholic schools and Catholic charities in the Archdiocese. Bids exceeded $130,000 by late Tuesday. The auction ends tomorrow afternoon. Cardinal Timothy Dolan plans to greet the winning bidder and bless the car at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Now reaching more than 264 million homes, EWTN's success is credited to Mother Angelica's communication instincts. Catherine Szeltner is here sharing Mother's media legacy tonight.
Mother Angelica has been dubbed the pioneer of Catholic television. Today, TV viewers say there are too many channels to choose from. But when Mother Angelica launched EWTN, cable was in its infancy. Around the same time CNN and MTV burst onto the cable scene, so did a certain cloistered nun.
Name of Jesus, who is Lord, may his eternal word be proclaimed.
With no professional TV experience and $200 in hand, in 1981, Mother Angelica transformed an Alabama garage into EWTN's TV studio. Service Electric's Jack Capperell was the first cable operator to take a chance on the religious network.
Once you met Mother, you would know that it was going to work.
Capperell quickly learned the network's value when a customer called to thank him one day.
He was going through the dial, he was ready to commit suicide, and he flipped on the channel and he said, she was talking directly to me, and it made such a difference in his life that he couldn't explain. He's thanking me. I said, don't thank me, thank Mother Angelica and our Lord.
Word spread among other cable operators they could make a difference by broadcasting the television nun.
This is a book that you live. It's alive.
Mother's accomplishment isn't lost on the writer behind the church chronicling website Whispers in the Loggia.
The bishops of the U.S. had put $15–20 million into trying to do a Catholic TV network, and it all fell apart.
By creating the first mainstream and independent Catholic media outside the church, Palmo says Mother Angelica blazed a trail for Catholic journalists today.
It was the beginning of a media movement that we're still seeing in a way beyond cable, now on the internet.
35 years later, EWTN's reach continues to grow, and so does Mother's.
I love you, so just God loves you more. Bye now.
Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. It was part of Mother's dream to see EWTN reach the whole world with a special presence in Rome. It is so good to have Joan Lewis joining us from Rome. Joan, what can you tell us about your relationship with Mother? How did she affect you in your life?
Well, actually, from the first moment that I met her, which was surely by accident, it was August of 2005, August 22nd, and I had just signed the contract for EWTN as the Rome bureau chief. And Doug Kegg said, Joan, have you ever been to the shrine in Hansville? And I said, gosh, no. So we went out there, and two things happened. Deacon Bill and his wife were there. They were celebrating a big anniversary. And then Doug and I went down into the crypt, and it was absolutely amazing because there was Mother Angelica in a wheelchair with two nuns on either side of her. She was praying at the tomb of her own mother. We waited the proper time, and then Doug brought me over, introduced me by name and by title, the Rome bureau chief. And at this time, of course, she was not speaking. I thought I heard her say bless because I did kneel down. She had wanted always to start EWTN in Rome. So now, 24 years later, she has a bureau chief in Rome. And I had studied up so much on her by then, so she was my inspiration from day one. And just as we do at Mass before the gospel, when we bless ourselves on our forehead and on our mouth and on our heart, so that the words of God are in our mind and on our lips and in our heart, she blessed me. And she blessed my hands as well. So that was very, very meaningful to me, and I can see that moment as if it was 5 minutes ago.
Well, Joan, this morning we saw the Holy Father point to heaven and basically say she is in heaven. Also, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI reflected on her very shortly after she passed. What did he say?
And he said the fact that she had died on Easter Sunday was a gift. And other people, thousands may have used other words, but I think that's exactly how everybody felt. You know, if you're going to meet your Maker, you may as well enter the kingdom of heaven on Easter Sunday and be greeted by the risen Lord. So it was a gift to her, just the fact that God did call her on that day. It was a gift to her, but then, you know what, Brian, it was a gift to all of us.
Yes, you and our Rome team there are a gift to the network as well, and I know you'll carry on Mother's work. Joan Lewis, thanks for joining us from Rome tonight.
My pleasure.
EWTN offers special programs honoring Mother. Tomorrow you can watch the public visitation and rosary 10:30 Eastern, solemn vespers in memoriam at 5:30 p.m. and the vigil and rosary for the deceased at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're back with you on Friday. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night, and may Mother Angelica rest in peace.